Thank you for coming. We'll talk a little bit about woo-woo of quantum technology, but I will drive the circle also around to the science. And that's really the main focus of this presentation, to take you through the amazing science and what's possible. So we all brush our teeth in the morning. We all take a shower usually in the morning. We exercise. We maybe use red light therapy, supplements, mental exercises possibly, to stay in good shape, to work on our longevity. But do we take care of our biofield? Big question. We should, because that's what we are in essence. We are frequency and energy at core, yet we just worry about our physical stuff, right? As soon as we have a health problem in the physical, we try to take care of it and combat it. Longevity also is really something where we think, well, we just need to have a healthy body, right? And then that takes care of itself. And that's true in essence, but how do I have a healthy body? If I have a healthy biofield, I also have a healthy body. And so what I want to introduce to you is a way to really strengthen your biofield in a way it wasn't done before. And it adds to everything you're already doing. I'm not here to tell you should stop exercising, you should stop taking your favorite supplements and all of that, but you can do a lot more. Okay, so that's the video that we can't play. That is just here very quickly, so you have a little idea of actually how the technology looks like. Not that I really want to go into it, because you can look at that at the booth. But by now, there are over 59 different studies that were performed, 48 of those placebo-controlled, randomized, blinded, sham-controlled in various different countries by independent labs and institutes and universities in the US, in Europe, in Asia, that have tested this quantum technology, which we have a little bit of a difficult way to understand it with the brain, right? Because it's new technology. What happens with new technology? Can you remember how it was with cell phones, for example? Just imagine you would go back to the 14 or 1500s with your iPhone and talk to someone on the street and explain to them what you can do with it. They would think you're nuts. They wouldn't even have the vocabulary. They've never heard the words of what you can do. You can stream things. You can, I don't know, do things on Instagram. They don't know what that even means. The same thing you remember was with the internet. Even in 1994, 1995, I remember in Germany at the time, I was telling people, you know, we'll move into the age where we all use emails. And people said, we don't need that. We won't use that because we can write letters, and that's a nice way to do that. Why would we need that stuff? Well, also it's so slow, right? It doesn't really have a benefit. Now look, a few years later, what happened, and everybody gets it, right? Same thing as with these health technologies when you work on a quantum level, because someone has a phone on. Could you be so kind and turn it off? Thank you so much. Because quantum technology doesn't work with magnetism. It also doesn't work with electricity. So if you see something that's not plugged into the wall or is not battery operated, the brain naturally thinks, well, but then it can't work, right? But the opposite is true. It actually couldn't work if you plugged it in, and it couldn't work if you added a battery, because then it would destabilize the field. So it's just new technology. So one of the institutes that tested the technology really in regards to almost everything that you can test is the Besa Institute in Austria. It's the largest independent research institute in regards to biofeedback and biosystem analysis. They test everything in regards to cellular voltage for the different organs and go very granular into every organ to see what is the health. They've tested EMF neutralization, harmonization, positive impact in general of the human body, blood, food, water. They tested that it was able to neutralize herbicides and pesticides on a frequency level, and they tested a lot of different other things. Right now there's a huge animal study actually going on in Europe with 26 animals that they're also leading. And one of the interesting ones that I wanted to highlight here is an electric car study that they did, because most of you are probably aware of the EMFs, 4G, 5G, that is quite an issue. And I used to be vice president at T-Mobile, running 14 countries in Europe and then also in the US. So I know quite a bit about this technology, and I'm not in the camp of saying we need to tear down all the 5G towers, because it's not going to happen. I tell you, the industry is too powerful, and also we as consumers have a lot of convenience, right? It's amazing, this technology in a way, but it comes with a downside. It comes with a downside of short-term, mid-term, and long-term effects on the human body. And in electric cars, unfortunately, the exposure is the highest you can get. It is incredibly high. You find it also in gas-operated cars nowadays quite a lot, because they have a lot of electronics built in, but the highest exposure really is in electric cars. So what did they test? They tested driving an electric car. They tested how it is when you drive longer in an electric car, which actually then the exposure is higher. They tested also what happens if you're on your cell phone while you're driving, and if someone else is driving with you and is also on your phone. In all those cases, they did a before test, and this is one of these examples here where you can see on the left-hand side, it shows, maybe it's about 50-50 balanced and not good in terms of the situation of the human body of that test person. Then with the EMF in the electric car, within minutes, all the organs start to deregulate. Some of them actually in a pathological way already. And it's an extreme stress that we're in that moment. Then the exposure stays the same, and our technology is introduced, and you see within minutes, it's all regulated. All the organs are in perfect balance and health regulation. I think we have a slide here that shows you the granular level. So that's about the granular level that they test. So they look at the lungs, the skin, the intestines, the stomach, the bladder, etc., and the heart. So really at each individual organ. And so you see how it all deregulates with the EMF in an electric car. And then suddenly it's all harmonized. And how does that happen, right? Because this works on a below subatomic level. It interacts in two ways. One is it interacts with our biofield, so it strengthens the biofield. It's as if the biofield gets the signal, okay, get into optimal state and optimal potential, and that's what we're doing. And then you see suddenly positive physical results because the organs follow the mind, right? Everything follows the energetics. But at the same time, it also harmonizes the space around the body, which is the environment we're in. So all of this, all of that. Usually I have stressors here because there's Wi-Fi on. There's tons of cell phones here right now interacting. And all of that adds stress to my body and to my biofield. So that is being harmonized as well. You can think of these destructive waveform patterns as being harmonized so they're not destructive anymore. My analogy is always, if one of you would hit me in the face right now, it would hurt me. But if you gave me an acupressure on the neck, it's suddenly beneficial. It's still a force, you're still doing something, but it's not bad for me. And that's pretty much how that works. So this was just an example of this so-called HEAL capsule that was tested in a long-term study. See similar results. Now we're moving into something that is really a foundation, one of the big building blocks of longevity, and we're going to hit ATP production, cell recovery and mitochondrial function, and we're going to talk about the blood. Those three cornerstones I find extremely relevant for longevity. And here, in regards to ATP production, there were 3 studies done by the University of Tulsa. An expert in the field, Dr. Robert Schief, said when we asked him, could you perform such a study to see if our technology is able to increase ATP production? He said, I certainly can. That's what I do. I've been doing this since over 20 years. I don't think your technology can do that, though. Because his mindset is a very mainstream mindset, or at least was at the time. We said, okay, well, let's just go test it. So it was done in a randomized double-blind fashion. What happened is that he was able to show a 20 to 29% increase in ATP production. And the jumps of ATP production up happened instantly the moment the charging started. So basically, the press of a button, we were able to increase ATP production in actual human cells. And it was blinded, and after the first study, he said, wow, this is incredible. I have to do it one more time, though, because I have a part of me that I need to get along. So he did it a second time. Then he said, okay, now it's clear. The data is clear, but let's just do it a third time, just because before I publish it, I want to cover my butt. You know how it is, with the narratives out there. And so he did it a third time. Same thing happened. Then we moved on into wound healing studies, because then we asked him, okay, so ATP production, that's great, but what about actual cell recovery? Can you test something like that? He said, yeah, sure, that's a little bit more difficult, but I can do it. The way you do it is you use, again, human cells, you scratch them with a laser. It can also be done mechanically. And then you just wait until the cells are healed, and you basically measure the time it takes until the cells are healed. Okay, so he did a study, and by the way, it was then repeated 5 times in total. And each of these studies were already statistically significant on their own, because he used millions of cells in the control group, millions of cells in the treated group. And what was shown was an increase and an acceleration in wound healing of 50 to 100% in all of those studies. So basically all the treated cells healed way, way faster than the ones that were not treated, which is quite remarkable. Now Dr. Robert Schief tells all of his students about quantum and about the possibilities that are out there. So obviously, since he's gone through, everything changed for him. This was just a glycinate study that is actually still going on. We don't have to spend much time on that. I also want to jump through this one. That's the EGIF Institute. That's the largest independent EMF testing and research institute in Europe. They've tested the technology also in multiple ways, and we became certified. Everything in regards to Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G, everything you can think of. I don't know how 6G and 7G are going to be like, but from all we know at this point, it doesn't really matter, because the quantum field is really the most foundational layer of energy, and is able to harmonize everything that is happening on the biomagnetic or bioelectric spectrum, or electromagnetic spectrum. One study that I found interesting here from the EGIF Institute was that they tested heart rate variability. I think that's also quite relevant to longevity, just because it's directly linked to our autonomic nervous system. And so if that is optimized, that's already a good thing. They showed that in this case, the HEAL capsule was able to improve the heart rate variability in all cases in the test persons. And they also did the test of before test with Wi-Fi, and then with our technology. Now this is blood here that we're going to talk about. And I want to give you a little bit of a background in regards to dark field microscopy and live blood analysis. It's the best tool to look at your blood in real time, where you can see in a magnified and illuminated fashion how the blood cells look like. What is going on in your blood? Do you have clotted blood? Do you have parasites in your blood? Are your white blood cells activated? Are they paralyzed? That's what you can see. And then you can do an intervention. I don't know, you can take a pill, you can take a shot, you can do all kinds of different things and then see exactly what is happening now with the blood. So this tool is still widely used in Europe, in Russia, and in many other areas. In the US, it tends to be just used by researchers nowadays, because about 20 years ago, they decided to charge a practitioner a $100,000 license fee per year. That's how you make things go away, even though you're not banning it, because quite frankly, it's one of the most effective diagnostic tools to tell you what's going on with your overall health, right? So that's a little bit sad. That's why I bring this up, because you may not have heard about dark field microscopy or live blood analysis, but you'll be stunned by what you'll see here. We started off with before and after testing, which is, you know, the simplest way of doing that, right? You just test someone and then you test them again after using a product, for example. Then I was introduced to Dr. Beverly Rubik, who is in the US the most recognized researcher in the field of dark field microscopy, because she had voiced concerns about the electromagnetic fields and how terrible the blood is developing in all humans that she's measuring, and she's measured those over decades, and each year she sees, even on average, that the blood gets worse, right? And then I was introduced to her, and I told her, well, so we may have this solution for the EMF problems. And she said, well, okay, let me take a look. And she took a look, and she said, well, it looks all very promising, but you know, you just have before and after testing. You don't have a gold standard study in this field. And I said, so what do you mean exactly? And she said, well, you have to have a randomized sham-controlled study that's blinded, you know, not just before and after testing. I said, okay, so do you know someone that can help us with that? She said, yeah, I do that. And I said, okay, so how can we set it up? And okay, long story short, she set it all up, and then she told me we'll start with 4 test persons. And I was like, well, 4 test persons, I mean, no one is going to believe anything if it's just 4 test persons. She said, I don't want to blow your budget. I don't think your technology can do this. It's just energy. So let's just start with 4. That's how you usually do it. If it works, we know it right away. And then we can just take it to statistical significance in the next study. And then that's exactly what she did. And when she called me after she was done with her first study, she was like, oh my God, this really works. This is crazy. And you have the solution. You don't only have the solution for the EMF problem. This is a solution for the blood clotting issue, which we're seeing right now developing in a big way, right? Because, you know, think of all the things that have been done to us that clot our blood. So here's one very representative example. It's not a best case example. This is really the average of what was seen. And by now, I think 5 studies were done by Dr. Rubik in a blinded and randomized fashion, sham-controlled, very important, sham-controlled. So she had devices that worked and that were infused, but then she had devices that looked the same, but they were not working, right, a sham device. So you see on the left-hand side the baseline blood. What you see mainly there is the red blood cells, actually. That is without Wi-Fi, in a completely Wi-Fi free environment in a lab. Then Wi-Fi is turned on. After 10 minutes, you see how the blood looks like. And even if you've never seen blood, you will be able to tell now and feel how terrible that looks. You have a higher increase of stroke, heart attack, heart disease, all kinds of diseases when you have blood like that. Your white blood cells are paralyzed and your red blood cells are clumped. This is stage 2 of blood clotting, what you see there. Then they leave Wi-Fi on, and then when the block technology is introduced, whether they put hands inside, which was tested in the beginning, or it's just in the room, doesn't really matter. It both works. Then suddenly, everything reorganizes in the blood. The red blood cells look healthy. They're separated how they should be. The blood is oxygenated. The white blood cell activity and motility is increased again. So that's quite remarkable. And if you can take care of your blood, if you can take care of your cell recovery and your ATP production and your heart rate variability through the biofield, it's an important layer for longevity that I think most people haven't really looked at. So this just shows really quickly. You saw this here on the picture before. You know how it actually looks, but then in terms of data, you can see there weren't marginal improvements. The improvements are significant, absolutely significant. And what's also important to mention here is that these results happened and have happened in 100% of the cases. It's not random. It's not 10% improvements. It has happened in 100% of the cases. So the last thing I just want to go into real quick, because it's not just all about the human body, because you can charge food, you can charge water with quantum energy as well. And what does that do? So the Emoto Institute out of Japan tested this on water, and they found that this method was able to improve water faster than any other method they'd ever tested before. Now, most of you have probably heard of Masaru Emoto, who was the pioneer in regards to figuring out that you can change the energy in water and how you can visualize this state with these crystals. So it so happened that out of the control water that had just one beautiful crystal, within 3 minutes, suddenly there were 5 beautiful crystals. So the water gets structured. And that is also happening with foods, especially with foods that contain a lot of water, but even things like sugar. A clinic in Munich in Germany was testing in a pilot study of 55 to 85% reduction in stress response to the human body when they had sugar and they were exposed to sugar. And that same is true pretty much with other substances that people are allergic to. So that's pretty much it. I think we're coming exactly to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for coming. And I want to say, usually I do Q&As after this because it's such a new field. We don't know much about. You may have a lot of questions. I'm going to go over to the booth now. That's pretty much right there. That's the Lila Quantum Tech booth. You find me there, and you find also my team members. If you have any questions, feel free to come. Thanks so much and enjoy the show, the summit.